Hey, peace and blessings to you. My name is Jerry B. I am the EntreMusician, and so are you. And we're actually ending this year, 2024, with an incredible conversation with a gentleman that I met online through Faith-Driven Entrepreneur. Very, very good community that we'll talk about. But this gentleman is an award-winning writer, director, and stunt coordinator. He is the founder of Eyre Films, and he's my new best friend. His name is Ian Eyre, and I'm delighted to welcome him to this final edition of season 6 of the EntreMusician podcast. Dude, how you
Jerry,
doing, bro?
Oh, it's been so great to get to know you.
You as well. You as well. So how are things today? All is well with you?
All is well. I keep getting new inspiration. We're created in the image of our creator, which means there's nonstop creativity going on.
Non-stop creativity. And here's the interesting thing. As I introduce you as writer, director, stunt coordinator, who will I be talking to today?
I can't separate myself. I can't compartmentalize.
So you find that as far as creativity is concerned, that you're just wearing one hat at a time, or you have them all stacked up?
I'm left-brained. So I got an engineering degree. I fell in love with movies late in life, and I applied my engineering degree to stunts and special effects, mechanical and pyro effects, and then also screenwriting and producing, directing, all from a left-brain perspective. So, to me, it all makes sense as one big happy family and foundation for the future.
That's amazing because, as you say, if we were talking about musicianship or songwriter, musician, producer, arranger, etc., I don't know where one begins and the other ends. It just kind of flows together. But not the stunt coordinator part, though. That's kind of where, you have to explain a little bit.
Well, you don't jump into coordinating stunts if you've never hit the ground. So I will, I have confidence to coordinate a version of stunts that I've also performed. So I've done a variety of stunts, and there's the stunt performer has a briefcase, which is actually a large duffel bag full of pads, and you just, there's something known as all around abilities, and that just means you can move and you know how to hit the ground without breaking something, because you've got the right pads and whatever. So, and a lot of times stunts are in your head. So, for example, doing somersaults down a staircase is only 20% physical. It's 80% in your head. So on the first go round, you're not going to overcome that fear of rolling down pointed steps. But after you've done it a few times, and you realize how amazing your pads are, and you realize that the faster you go, the less you feel it, there's a whole lot of things to overcome mentally. And then it's just like rolling down a grassy hill.
It's amazing because that immediately brings up two questions. Number one, what came first, the stunt coordinator or the writer/director? And two, what type of person actually wants to fall for a living? I mean, you got to tell me.
Yeah, I know there's something a little off, right?
I'm not saying that. I'm just asking.
Well, there's a lot to that. There's a lot to that question. So, I started stunts in 1990 with the live shows at Six Flags, and I didn't start screenwriting until 97. And I guess all along I've wanted to be an action director, and I didn't know how to get into it because I grew up without a television. So one direction is through stunts, stunt coordinating, second unit directing, which is the unit on a set that doesn't involve the actors. So it's a support role. And then you get into being a first unit director. And the other way is through screenwriting and producing and directing. So I started that later in life, and I've directed and produced and written a whole bunch of short films and participated in producing a couple features. So I'm trying to get that opportunity to direct my first feature film, and it might not be action on the level of John Wick or anything, but it'll have some stunts because stunts is what sells internationally in the trailer. Those are the trailer moments.
Oh, wow. See, I had no idea.
Yeah. But as far as wanting to hit the ground, um, you know, when I see a stunt or I do my own stunts, like my shirt says, when you watch playback, the filmmaker in me says, "Oh, I can do that better." So then you have to overcome a little more, you know, go a little higher, or after you hit, exaggerate the bounce so it looks like a greater impact. Where, you know, you add a bit of that improv or that acting to it. You know, actors are taught that acting is reacting. Well, I teach that in stunts, action is reaction. So if you throw a powerful punch and I don't react very strong, it doesn't it doesn't look like a hit. So it's all about how does the performer sell, you know, sell the stunt.
Yeah. So how good are you at being a double? So you've had to wear a lot of different makeup, different wigs and whatnot to be the double for the actor?
Yeah, sometimes they've shaved my head to wig me properly. Sometimes I've worn creature makeup, the rubber prosthetics that takes hours to spray paint and get it right. Not spray paint, but airbrush.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, what's the rest of the question? I think there's definitely a desire. Oh, that's what I was going to say. So there's different levels of risk, and when you're starting out, you know, falling 20 feet into an airbag might seem like a high risk. But if you start at 10 feet off a ladder and work your way up and work on technique and and perfect your body motion in the air, then that 20 feet becomes less risky. So it's a lot of calculated risks. And stunt people don't like to be compared to daredevils because daredevils are just turning off their brain and going for it and hoping for the best. Whereas a stunt performer trains, rehearses, builds that muscle memory, and calculates the risks and reduces the risk as much as possible. So after a while, yeah, the level of danger to me, something like jumping on a moving train when I was starting out would seem super dangerous, and now it seems like, okay, well, now I know, you know, these rocks are going to turn my ankle, and all the different factors that goes into it, and I can process the best scenario to be safe.
My goodness gracious. Well, man, you're just triggering questions in me, but you said something earlier that I do not want to get away from. And you said or made reference to the fact that uh, you couldn't watch TV or didn't watch TV as a kid.
We didn't have a television. Well, for one
Okay.
month in third grade, and then it stopped working, and my parents had no value for it. So
Okay.
growing up until I was 10, when did I? I don't think I saw a movie until there was a movie playing at a science theater. That was my first movie. Well, I should go back. I think I mentioned to you one other time. There was a Star Trek. I went to a party when I was in third grade, I think, and they had rented a 16 millimeter film projector and rented a Star Trek movie on 16 millimeter. And I don't know what the movie was anymore, but it was such a foreign idea to me. I was so uncomfortable that I asked my parents to come get me early. I didn't feel like I was out of my comfort zone. I didn't feel like my parents would approve.
I did they have any taboo? Was television a taboo other than the fact that it did not work for a minute and they didn't have any
Yeah,
value for it?
they were the boycott Hollywood generation, or at
Hmm.
least in their church circles. My dad was a lay pastor before I was born, and well, really a lay pastor, lay missionary after
Ah,
I was born. Just
yeah.
volunteering and always being connected. And mom was a super teetotaler and anti pop culture, everything. And
Hmm.
I think they had value for books, but not for movies or not for TV.
Was there anything that when you begin to take movies seriously, stunt coordinator, writing, directing, that was there any type of tension or lack of acceptance of what you were doing?
I definitely felt it, but I knew how to spin it. That, if I gave them the perspective that God was calling me to it,
Mm.
then they would totally accept it. So, not to manipulate them, but when I was in college, I went to a missions conference, and there was a Broadway actor doing the entire book of Luke as a one-man play, entirely from memory. And so here was a guy at a high level of performing arts who was a solid Christian, and he gave a workshop, and I talked to him afterwards, and he said, if God's calling you to it, you got to do it. So that was kind of my first, outside of my own rebellious, you know, not in the sense of rebelling against God, but certainly not understanding my interests or why. And it started in high school, making videos for different clubs and whatever. But this Bruce, I got to remember his name. This Broadway actor released me from that tension.
Yeah, yeah. No, I understand exactly what you mean. It's something very interesting, I guess it happens later in life, but there are phases. When we're off camera, I got to tell you my life story. We don't have time here to tell you, but the concise Cliff Notes version is, growing up the way I did, it was secular music. And so, really, if you're going to play drums in the choir, then why are you
Sure.
out, doing that? So,
Oh yeah.
I've gone through similar things, but it wasn't until later in life that after I had already quote unquote rebelled, and it wasn't anything against my parents. It was just like having this settled in my heart that this is what I was called to do. It was actually about 18 years ago when I first learned of Lance Wallnau. And Lance was talking about the 7 mountain mandate, basically. And arts and entertainment is one of those mountains that people of faith,
Mm.
God, Jesus followers should be at the top of that mountain. I mean,
Yeah.
what does salt and light mean if it's
Right.
not influence from that perspective? And it just settled all of the things that the 14-year-old me was trying to tell my pastor, my youth director. It's like, no, it's not that at all. I'm not going out there and doing anything crazy. It's just I'm a musician. This is what
Yeah.
happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I can imagine.
Well, and there's all levels of music. There's the music that your parents might approve, and there's the music that your parents might not approve. I
Sure.
think the first cassette tape I brought home was Petra,
Mm,
and that was pretty hard rock for my parents.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But the message was like, yo, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Right in line.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing. Now I have to segue, and like I said, you started hitting me, and I know I'm jumping around, but let's stick with the parents. Let's stick with Petra, and let's stick with the line of once you begin creating your own films, how your faith personally impacts the stories that you want to tell.
Yeah, good question. So definitely CDs weren't around at that time when I brought home that Petra tape. Um, my my journey growing up in a pastor's missionary kind of home, and they weren't full time, but the mentality was they were always representing missions conferences at churches. We always had missionaries staying at our house or cooking international dinners. So I grew up with that perspective of my life is not my own. There's
Mm,
more out there than my neighborhood or my pop culture interests.
sure.
Um, and that's developed over time as a maturity and a desire to not waste my life, not waste my moments, my 168 hours a week.
Right.
Um, why am I here on Earth, and what am I supposed to do with my time? And also kind of processing how God made me, how He designed me, my personality, even the fact that I'm willing to jump off things and occasionally get hurt.
Right.
I got a concussion 4 days after my honeymoon and couldn't remember the wedding for 8 hours. So
Wow.
there's times where I've questioned, am I supposed to do stunts? Am I really, in God's plan here at this moment? And so I've done a lot of questioning and redirecting in my life.
Mm-hmm. So, with respect to where you are as a man of faith, again, the type of stories that you want to tell are those questions that your characters deal with, or lead us into that aspect.
Sure. Over time, I realized that most of the stories that I've been writing or I'm drawn to are in the genres of, action, of course, but physical comedy, Western, thriller, even certain types of horror. And my understanding is that culture speaks a language of movies often, and there's Christian distributors who have found it easy to make and sell movies to youth group leaders or pastors or whatever, and it's typically inspirational dramas, true stories, sometimes elements of thrill or war, but for the most part, if I go to these conferences and see who's making what kind of content, they're targeting age 12 and under, or they're targeting the parents of kids, and that'd be the 35-year-old soccer moms. But I've got two teenagers, and who's making movies that they choose to want to see when they're away from home? There's only a certain number of movies that my wife and I can suggest to our kids to watch with us, and it's a silly drama or whatever, and
right.
And movies are supposed to be entertaining.
Yes.
And my kids, I want to make movies that my kids and teenagers choose to watch when no one's looking, because those are the ones they're actually paying attention to. And without preaching, how can I entertain, and how can I raise the questions that they're grappling with, and give them role models on screen of characters they can relate to that are grappling with the same things, whether it's, bullying or, I've got a screenplay that I didn't write, but I'm attached to direct, and it's about bullying. And if you were going to take bullying to an extreme and Jesus's words to love your enemy, well, what if your enemy, for whatever reason, became a zombie and is trying to eat you? So this story is about a kind of a nominal, straight-laced Christian character who he's very judgmental and critical, and he's been raised in an environment where he knows what's right, but his friends don't agree with his beliefs. And how does he stand up for his faith? How does he walk the talk when he's under the extreme trial of somebody attacking his friends? And the first response is self-defense, and the second response is, wait, what if we can cool him down so his brain doesn't melt and save him? How do you love your enemy when he's trying to eat you?
That's certainly a departure from when a person say, well, this is a faith-based film. That is a little off center of what you would expect. And I would be a person that would champion that. I do remember early on when my girls were growing up, and I won't name the channel, but it's not it's an app, okay? And certainly, let me say, Angel Studios, love them, grateful that they're really progressing on. But there was this other faith-based app that, like a Netflix, and I just thought the material, the films, were so vanilla in the sense that who lives like this, that when I send my girls out to go to school, they're not dealing with this stuff. You know what I mean? And how can you make a compelling piece of entertainment that is rooted in scripture, but that is so magnetic and so exciting that my children can go, yes. I mean, this is actually real life. But I thought, it's so watered down.
Yeah.
I think vanilla is the right word. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think about the water cooler in the high schools. What are they actually talking about?
Exactly right. Exactly right.
And vanilla. So there's a movie. Well, I don't want to say the name of the movie, but
yeah,
it involves a former gangster going to church. But the representation, and they hired an actor who has got some street cred. He could play the role authentically, but the story was so geared to a church audience that the character had no authenticity.
Exactly. And even, okay, Jerry, so I have to reel myself in, but even, because I'm watching a movie as someone who writes for Sync, and I write for film, and so I'm going, wow, even the quote unquote hip hop scene was just so, uh, it's like bring it up, like do something with it, and I
Well,
don't
God's
know,
redemption. God's
maybe you can.
redemption.
But maybe you can explain. I mean, is there amongst Christian distribution, as far as films are concerned, is there like a cutoff level? Like, of course, if something's too edgy, it's too edgy. We understand that. But is there a lack of realism that they say, well, you might want to dial it back down? That's too whatever, or
Yeah.
your
Well,
movie doesn't get sold.
yeah, exactly. There's definitely some groups of people trying to solve this problem.
Okay.
One of the groups is called Lore TV, LOOR.TV, and they're creating an environment for creators to create content, kind of like MTV started with just young, hungry filmmakers, musicians, storytellers, just with a really scrappy mentality and starting experimentally and then growing organically. So they're willing to allow content for young males that these other distributors aren't willing to pick up. And that's going to happen. I talk to people all the time that want this kind of content, but typically they'll water down the faith elements so that it'll sell to Hollywood or some version of Hollywood. And Hollywood wants to make money, so they'll make money off of Christians' creativity all day long if the Christians are willing to make it the flavor that's appealing to them, a gaudianity versus Christianity. But God's redemption is extravagant and generous, and if you don't show, good is in contrast to evil. If you don't show evil authentically, then righteousness next to it doesn't seem that big a deal. And how many Christians are living a life where, I'm not that bad of a Christian, but we need to understand that our sin is totally offensive to God. And even if we don't think we sin that much,
Yeah.
we're
That much. That's an interesting term.
Yeah, it's like God is so perfect and we think we're not that bad, but
Right.
that we're missing the truth of it, is that we are that bad. And without Jesus, we have no hope.
Absolutely.
And the gospel gets watered down. So even in our churches, right? So if
you really want to go down that street? You don't want to go down that street today. not in this conversation. I mean, it's really interesting because it's yeah. Okay.
The Passion of the Christ, the reason that was so effective is they showed the excruciating pain and the evil of the Romans. Even viscerally, not so much with language because it was Aramaic with subtitles and culturally period accurate, but the violence of it was shocking because we hadn't seen it, because it had been watered down in every other movie. So, and now all of a sudden we have an understanding of what Jesus went through, and not on a separation from God level, but the word excruciating pain, that word didn't exist before crucifixion.
The thing about it, though, is too, in reading through the Gospels, it doesn't go into detail. And he was crucified. We know he was scourged, if you're using King James language, and then they crucified him. They crucified him between. But if you have no idea of what crucified means, and I think that's what Mel Gibson did, was he brought, this is what you meant. And yes, now we understand the reality of the horror that our Lord bore for us. And he took our sin upon him, and that was the penalty. And God allowed him to do that because he cares about us that much, and sin is that offensive to him, like you said.
And we definitely have to be careful about normalizing violence.
True.
A young person growing up, the Passion of the Christ would be way more shocking than somebody who's a veteran in a foreign war, or, just thinking about relative levels of violence.
True.
and in, you know, obviously anything written is going to conjure up your imagination based on your knowledge. So somebody just starting out in life might already have a watered down version of violence because they haven't been exposed to it. It hasn't been normalized. They haven't been desensitized to it. But someone who knows that, you know, the true horrors of some of those ancient pagan rituals,
Yeah.
you know, now when I'm reading the same words, I'm conjuring up something way more horrific. So
Certainly.
when you put it into visual, you don't give the audience that choice.
Truth.
So we do have to be careful. We can't glorify it.
I think we needed that spanking too. I think that's what The Passion did. You know,
I think a lot of people, yeah,
it woke us up.
Yeah.
Now you might think that this is a weird segue, but you know, with respect to the films that you've been making, especially, is it Pray for Raymond? Pray for
Mason.
Mason, because that was the one that you were describing. But
Right.
someone, I don't know if he was a critic or a reviewer of your films, said your films are like Scooby Doo on steroids. I mean, so how do you, I know we're walking from The Passion to back to your films,
Yeah.
but how do you rectify that? Because you
Well,
thought enough about it to put it on your website. You know what I mean?
I know, actually. So I was in a writer's group, and half of the group was actors because they wanted to cold read scripts and learn, you know, practice their acting. And the other half was writers, and we all took turns having our scripts read. And I wasn't getting a very good reception for this movie. It was a movie called Smash and Run, and it's basically Fast and Furious on foot with teenage crime fighters.
Mm.
And afterwards, the guy leading the group was like, "Well, that was like Scooby Doo on steroids." And I think, and I was, you know, I was really confused by the. I thought I had a good script, and I wasn't getting a very strong reaction. And then I had the thought to ask the group, "Has anyone seen any of the Fast and Furious movies?" And none of them had. And I'm like, "Oh, you guys are the wrong audience." Oh. So what this guy said about that movie in particular being Scooby Doo on steroids, I think he meant it kind of facetiously or negatively, but to me, I was like, yeah, that's a great description, because you want to be able to boil down things to as few words as possible, and Scooby Doo on steroids does it.
That's true.
And Pray for Mason is also Scooby Doo on steroids, you know. So I realized that that's kind of what I write. There's a level of comedy, there's a level of hijinks and physical action, and then at the base of it is these characters going through, you know, everyday struggles with their parents and their friends, and fears of this and that, you know, fear of heights, fear of death, fear of mockery. And
absolutely.
And yeah, so Scooby Doo on steroids is, I'll proudly wear that moniker if I find the audience that wants Scooby Doo, but amped up to a teenager level, not zoinks.
Right. Amazing. Well, let me ask this question, because we're on your films. The posters that I see behind you, they are your friends. You want to tell us a little bit about them? Can you describe them to us a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
The movie?
So on this side is Vengeance Trail. It's the Western feature. It's the first feature I helped produce over 20 years ago, and it started out as a student film shot on standard def. And I've used AI tools to bump it up to 1080p, new art, new, you know, sweetening of the sound. And we projected it in a theater in April to an audience, and it held up, you know, for something that started out as a student film on standard def. If you can imagine, standard def is, and interlaced too, if you know anything about that old technology. And to blow it up to 1080p, where it'll play on a high def TV or a digital projector on a 20-foot screen.
Wow.
So that movie, I didn't have any influence on the script or raising money or marketing or distribution, but for a small amount of cash and some time, I'm learning distribution for independent films, because the movie itself, you know, it didn't make that much money the first time round at Blockbuster and Walmart, but all of that's under the water under the bridge. You know, that the investors wrote that off a long time ago. So I'm not really risking that much to learn what I don't know as far as selling movies. because movies are expensive, and we have to know how to be faithful to the investors with a financial ROI, even if they also value a kingdom-minded ROI, return on investment.
Absolutely.
So, and then, I mean, it's not a faith film. It's good versus evil. It's an action shoot 'em up with a lot of heart. But there is one line that I used AI. I got permission from the writer to change a line. When the hitman shoots the Gramps character, in the original script, the hitman says, "Do you believe in God?" And he says, "I do my best." And it's always bugged me because that character leads a funeral later in the movie. So he's technically the only potentially Christian character. And he's going to point to himself when somebody asks him a question about eternity. So I changed the line from "I do my best" to "I trust in Christ." And the AI tools allow you to do that now, and the writer gave me permission. So to me, it's not an anti-gospel movie anymore. It's still, it's an action movie with lots of blood and all the rest. But anyways, let's see here. Run Cholo Run is an urban crime thriller that has a 10-minute short with 2.5 million views and a feature script that we're workshopping, and we're hoping to make that in Los Angeles. I don't think that works anywhere else. Acts of Violence is the second feature I helped produce, but it's kind of dormant right now. Don't Talk About Jesus was a short film I made with my Bible study in Los Angeles, and it's you've got truth or love. So you've got the truth family that's really strict. You've got the love family that's really hippie, and their kids are getting married. And the end of the movie is we need truth and love, because there is only one truth, that's Jesus. There's only one love, that's Jesus. You can't have one without the other, and so often we do. But truth without love misses the mark, and love without truth misses the mark. So
you're absolutely right.
Absolutely. And it's a comedy.
Did you write that? You wrote that?
I guided the script, and then I directed it. It was for a speed competition called 168film.com. And then they give you a scripture and a theme, and then you have a week roughly to to write the script, and then another week to shoot and to edit and turn it in.
And how long is it? How long is that movie?
That's a 10-minute short.
10-minute? Got it.
That was my film school, is doing speed competitions.
Gee, very cool. I didn't mean to interrupt you. You were going to introduce your last
one. Well, that's Vengeance Trail again. It's the old poster. That's that's the Blockbuster cover. So you can see the difference.
Yeah. Wow. Very cool. And so are these films available on Eyre Films?
On my YouTube channel.
Okay, on the YouTube channel.
Yeah, you look around. If you go to eirefilms.com, you'll find links.
Excellent.
And there's other projects. Smash and Run is on Eyre Films, and that has a comic book. And then there's another, my favorite project that is the first thing I wrote, but it took me the longest time to write it. It's called Puberty from Heck, and it's about a late bloomer who he doesn't realize he hasn't gone through puberty yet because he overcompensates with aggression, and it turns out that his friend put him under a fairy tale curse. So he's been stuck in his puberty, and then he breaks the curse the week before prom and goes through all the stages of puberty in that week. Wow. So he shoots up vertically, and then he breaks out with acne, and then at the midpoint he hooks up, and he's as strong and as handsome as the bully, and he's just as undesirable to the female interest as the bully. And so the second half of the movie, he has to learn character and how to be a man of character.
Wow. And you wrote that's your writing right there.
Yes.
It's the more I get to know you, that kind of sounds like you. That kind of sounds like
it's semi-autobiographical.
But my question was, one of the things that I saw that I thought was really, really neat on your website was your family involvement. How is your family involved in the music movie making process?
Sure. Well, my wife's very strong with story. She just doesn't have time to analyze anything over 10 minutes. So she's helped me a lot on my shorter content. And then my kids, I think I was just hoping they would follow in my footsteps, but they're not really interested. And I got tired of trying to coerce them. But they've got some natural talent, and they were the stars of a few short films.
So the ones you showcased though was from several years back then. So they're no longer, you know.
Well, the first movie they were in, my daughter was about 6 months and my son was 2.5.
Oh, wow.
And then that Doritos commercial, Who Wants Lemonade? Who Wants Lemonade? They were about 2 and 4. And then the Halloween, War of the Worlds, they were about 8 and 10 or 10 and 12. And I think that might be the last project I did with them.
So they were pretty excited at that point about.
Yeah. And during COVID, I had to get them out of the house. So we created an ongoing web series and another show. A Nerf for Noobs. They were a bit older in Nerf for Noobs. They were probably 13 and 15. And they had to do a shoot them up with their friends and cousins in our backyard. And, you know, we just had to get the kids out of the house. And
yeah, I can dig
that. Was a good way.
I can dig that. Now, you mentioned earlier, made a reference to the fundraising process. I went to a film workshop here in my area about 2 weekends ago, and one of the films we watched was raised entirely using crypto and selling some of the stills as NFTs, and that's how they raised money for the film. How big is that growing?
Yeah, so currency? I definitely want to pick your brain about that. I know one guy who financed a feature film with crypto, but he studied it. I don't really know that world, but he goes to conferences and he'll go to the bar and he'll meet potential investors who are into crypto, and so he immersed himself in that world. And I don't know exactly if that's something he would want to do again, but there's definitely people that they prefer crypto over dollars.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And then as far as you mentioned making collectors, well, you said NFTs for frames of the movie. That's an idea I'm actually pursuing. I learned about a movie, 10 years ago called thetunnelmovie.com, and they sold every frame of their movie for $1 so that they could give the movie away for free. So in a 90-minute movie, there's about 130,000 frames. So they raised $130,000. And I imagine lots of people bought more than one frame.
Understood.
And then they gave the movie away, and it's had 25 million views. So there's a debate. Do you restrict your movie so that you make money, or do you go for the most number of views? Because out of 25 million views, they probably made decent money on merchandise,
Sure. That's pretty interesting. I find that, and I could be wrong in saying so, maybe I'm not going to phrase this question correctly, but I find that movies and music are kind of going through the same tunnel as far as independents are concerned. I mean, the industry has totally changed. And so for you, the views, and for us, the streams, but the streams are not really paying. But if 25 million people listen to your song, I mean, what can you do with those numbers? You know what I mean?
It depends if you have their email. Can you get them? Can you educate them about your next project? Can you invite them to the next thing or the concerts?
Absolutely. Or the merchandise, as you were saying. Some famous person, I'll leave them nameless, but they're ultra famous, said they sold more T-shirts than they sold music. It's just like, I'm in the T-shirt company. Is what
I've heard that Disney movies are lost leaders for selling, princess dresses and everything else.
Wow, interesting. this is an interesting world. Now, what about AI? You mentioned earlier about how AI helped you from the interlace to the small
Oh,
film, blowing it up
I-
to 1080. But what about other resources that AI is kind of marching into? Not so
sure.
much at a snail's pace.
There's editing AI software coming out where you upload your footage and ask for an edit. And think about those family videos you shot. If you wanted to, you know, I've got so much footage of started projects or podcasts or family videos, and I have to pick and choose what I edit because I want
Sure.
my output to have quality. And I have a different channel for family videos that I don't try to make them so cinematic. But
Mm-hmm.
if there's a AI that says, "Hey, give me a 5-minute version of this based on this topic," and give me 3 different versions, and it prints out an edit decision list that I can put into my software with my high res footage. I mean, that's a time saver.
Well, certainly. But now the other, side of the coin is AI as far as actors are concerned, or
Yeah,
avatars.
you know,
What do you think?
I don't know that. I shouldn't say it won't happen, but okay. Here's my example from stunts in action. um, on Spider-Man 3, we spent the stunt rigging team of about a dozen people spent a whole week designing a 3-second shot.
Hmm.
And then it got integrated on set with the breakaway wall and the actors and the camera movements and everything. And so it probably took half a day to shoot. I don't know. I think it took about 3 hours to shoot.
Mm-hmm.
But when the movie comes out, they add computer graphic layers on top. The shrapnel coming straight at the camera or whatever it is. And the audience doesn't appreciate the stunt because they think the whole thing is computer generated.
I
And
see.
so I think the audience with all of these fantastic movies are disconnecting. I think there's been in Hollywood there's been ups and downs where if there's too much fantastical CGI elements, the audience doesn't connect. Um, in Indonesia there's no firearms, so if someone in a movie gets shot, they have no connection to what that would feel like. But a
Wow.
paper, everyone knows how painful a paper cut is. So,
True.
so I think that AI, if people think that there was never a human on set with the logistics
Mm-hmm.
of hundreds of people working to get, a shot and a stunt person taking risks that he wouldn't do normally, but they're spending $10,000 a minute and he's doing this fantastic stunt because he said he would and he doesn't want to let the coordinator down. And I think all of that reads on camera is that the audience is more emotionally involved with the story. But
Mm.
if it's just invented on a computer and it's just a cartoon, well, it's good for kids, but it's not good for grown-ups.
That's a really interesting topic because again, I'm trying to contrast my experience with music and yours in film because I know of wonderful songwriters, but they're not singers, they're not musicians, but they're lyricists and whatnot that are utilizing AI to create their song, pick their singer, and pick the band, so to speak, put it all together, and are getting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of streams.
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, that's really interesting. And I think the last time that we spoke, I was telling you that I watch alux.com.
Hmm.
And one of the predictions that they made was that, in 7 years, actors will be the thing of the past because producers won't have to pay whomever, $50 million. They can just look for the right screenwriter and the right IT, I guess, person, CG coordinators and whatnot. And as long
Yeah.
as the story is compelling, that was their view on it. And obviously, I'm bringing it to you because I'd love to know
Yeah.
your opinion about that.
I think there's going to be a backlash. There's so much content that you can get on your phone that we don't need more content. So what are we going to
That's
feel
true.
like we're lacking? You can watch your content while sitting on the toilet. So
That's correct.
what's lacking? It's the human interaction.
Mm.
Comedies and horror movies aren't the same if you're by yourself and you can stop and go do the laundry or get a snack But if you're in a darkened theater with a crowd and
Sure.
you can't stop it, you're way more immersed. It's a way better experience. And the same with going to a concert, if you're in the mosh pit up front with your hero on the stage, I mean, that doesn't compare to watching it on your device. So I think experiential experiences with crowds is still going to be worth a premium.
Now I'm gonna hit you with that. I'm not pushing back. I agree with what you just said, but the next question naturally would be: is that our age talking? Would our kids or would the kids coming up feel the same about human interaction? I only put that out there because my youngest daughter is 24. Okay, so 24, 27, 42. Okay, my oldest daughter, being 42 years old, obviously she remembers family reunions. She remembers all of these things. My youngest daughter, my wife and I asked her about, in just a few years, you'll be coming up on your high school reunion. Well, I don't need to go to that because I see them online. I mean, it's just like, I'm just wondering. And that's why I'm asking you, do you think that it's a generational thing? We crave the human element, but
possible.
Well,
yeah, I think
the
they don't know that
12-year-olds.
Young people don't know that they need it, but they are more connected. When I left Toronto at age 9, that was cold turkey. I never saw my best friend again.
Yeah.
But when we left 2 years ago, when we left Los Angeles for Memphis, my teenagers were 16 and 14. It was a hard move for them, but they were so connected with their friends, and we made trips back, and they fell right in and reconnected instantly, and now they've made new friends. And so, they, and my kids, now that they're driving, they'll go out all the time to spend time with their friends, but they'll at the same time be home and like, I don't need to go anywhere. So sure. I don't know what the answer is, but I think they don't know that they need community. And when they're in isolation, it affects their soul or psyche. Yeah. And why we have all this depression and everything. Yeah. So we still have to get them out of the house. Go drink garden hose water. You're not coming in.
You sound like George Carlin, but but he did a joke on that. But that's for sure. But the interesting thing is, as you said, it's just going to be something to really look at and see, because if you don't know that you need connection, I mean, we learned a lot during the shutdown when people were isolated. Yeah. And you're right, the level of depression and all of these other emotional issues came to the fore. But, touch is the first thing that you have as a human being, that human touch. You know what I mean? So, it's definitely needed. And I think that your vehicle of film, my vehicle of music, to be able to speak to the spirit of someone is necessary to get them like locked into each other. Yeah. And I hope that's not my gray hair talking. You know what I mean?
I'll speak of one more thing. My daughter does homework by herself in her room, but while texting her group of friends and having a separate live feed looking at the ceiling, so they can, they're in community separately. So it is a totally different way of being connected.
It really is.
And there are ways to watch movies the same way, where everyone's in a different space, but they're experiencing something together.
Wow. Is interesting. Well, here's what I know. I know this. I know I could talk to you for another 3 hours, but maybe both of our schedules would not allow that to happen. So you're going to have to come back on the show again. Okay. And, we have a sister show called Director's Chair. So we're going to ask you to come on that as well when you're working on your next project, so we can kind of highlight that. The one thing before we go here, well, two things actually. I know that we're going to stop this episode and you're going to come backstage to talk to some of our members in the EntreMusician community, and I thank you for that. But you do so many of these interviews, man, and I'm sure you've been interviewed 100,000 times, but they have not. Well, okay, 100,000, half of 100,000. With respect to that, there are questions that you're asked all the time And I didn't ask that question. And you thought, man, Jerry, I wish you would have asked me this because the public needs to know this about me or my work. Can you answer that unasked question?
Oh, wow. I mean, I had an answer last time we had this discussion. What popped in my head is, looking back on my body of work, I realized there's a lot of patterns. I've got a lot of the hijinks, a lot of the immature for me, but fun for that age. There's kind of a theme of genre movies for Gen Z. So that's my catch-all phrase right now. I feel called to make genre movies for Gen Z.
Man, that's beautiful. And I know that you're the person to do it. I have to admit that I'm going to be more immersed in your movies than I have been. I mean, we set this up a couple of months ago, you know what I mean? And then I went off into something else. But I got to get some popcorn, man, and hit YouTube and really get into what you're doing. But the Pray for Mason was something that I thought, you know what? Yeah, that's got some edge on it.
That's a play on the word pray. There's Pray, pray for Mason.
Right,
but there's Prey, there's Mason's Prey. So
yeah, because the zombie aspect of it. So I dug it.
It's not a zombie movie because it's not a contagion. It's an overdose on a drug. So we played around with the zombie tropes.
But I mean, he's prey. He's like prey. Yep. Prey. Yeah.
Yep.
Not prey.
Someday I'm going to make a movie. Yeah, that's an aside. I don't want to give away that visual.
Well, you feel like me, man. We can talk another 2 hours, man. I really feel blessed to have met you. We didn't say too much in this conversation about faith-driven entrepreneur, but I've been in it about maybe a year and a half. How long have you been on that platform?
I discovered them 2.5 years ago. I took their foundation course and just fell in love with what they were teaching. And I was trying to find, business people in Memphis that had a heart for God and God's kingdom and the Great Commission. When we form a company, we don't need to form a mission statement. Jesus already gave us the mission statement.
That's right.
And when it comes to movies go around the world. So the first part of go into all the world and preach the gospel, that first part is there. But movies are entertainment. They're not supposed to preach. Let the pastors preach. Don't do a bait and switch where people think they're going to an entertaining movie and then you preach at them. That's what Disney does now. They're preaching propaganda. And we Christians need to be way beyond that and way more excellent and just let the power of story affect people.
So good. And we didn't talk about Angel Studios much either. I think we mentioned them last time. However, I think they're doing a good job of doing just what you're saying. So,
and the other thing is they're finding the audience first before they make the movie. So there's no risk to their movies. They're prepaid. And that means, it's the same amount of work, but you're doing the work first. Building the audience is hard. But if you do it first, then you're biblically, you're counting the cost like the parable and you're being a wise builder.
Absolutely. Well, you got to come back on. Okay. We're stepping literally into another year. So we've got to plan it out. All right.
Thank you so much,
man. Ian, I appreciate you, brother. God bless you, man.
God bless. Take care.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the EntreMusician podcast. Ian, EyreFilms.com. You want to check him out. And I would ask that you would like, subscribe, and share this video with everyone you know, and maybe about 14 people you don't. Tell them you get down with the EntreMusician. That's what we do here. We build community. We have great conversations. And if you want to be more involved with the community, all you have to do is hit me up right here. We'll do a one-on-one because we want you in. We do coaching, collaboration, community. It's all fun. It's all good, especially if you're a musician or songwriter who's over the age of 50. You will find your tribe. So, that's going to do it for today. My name is Jerry B. I am the EntreMusician, but as I say all the time, so are you. We will see you again next time. God bless.